My father used to say that a family is like a ship. You ride out the storms together, and you trust that everyone at the helm has the same destination in mind. You don't think to check if someone's quietly drilling holes in the hull beneath your feet. I found the holes, not all at once, but one by one, until the cold water of the truth was up to my neck and I was the only one who could feel it. It started, as these things often do, with a kindness. Or what was dressed up as one. The call came on a Tuesday evening in late October. The air had just begun to bite with that specific, leafy chill that promises winter. I was in the kitchen, my hands buried in warm, soapy water, washing the one good plate I hadn't yet packed away. The house echoed. It was too big for one person, a fact that had become a physical presence since Dad passed 3 months prior. The silence had a texture, thick, heavy, like wool. My phone vibrated on the counter, lighting up the dim room. Jessica, my younger sister by 7 years. Maya, her voice was a thin crackle, strained with a tears that aren't quite falling tremor I knew too well. I'm so sorry to call like this. Jess, what's wrong? I dried my hands on my jeans, my heart doing that familiar, anxious clench it reserved for her. Jessica's life had a tendency to unravel at the seams, and I was always the one holding the needle and thread. It's everything. A shaky sigh traveled down the line. The landlord is selling the condo. I have 30 days. And work, they're making cutbacks. I'm on the list. I don't know where to go. I closed my eyes, leaning against the cold granite of the island Dad had installed just 2 years ago. He'd been so proud of it. Oh, Jess, I know it's a huge ask, especially now, with you, dealing with everything. Her voice broke, convincingly. But could I, maybe stay with you for a little while? Just until I get back on my feet. I could help you. With the house, with sorting through Dad's things. You shouldn't have to do that alone. The offer to help was the hook. It was smart. She knew I was drowning in the administrative grief of death, the wills, the accounts, the sheer volume of a life now reduced to boxes. And she knew I felt guilty. Guilty for living in the family home, for having a stable, if quiet, life as a freelance graphic designer, for being the together one. Of course you can stay here, I said, the words leaving my mouth before my better judgment could catch them. This is your home too. That was the first lie I told myself. Blank. Jessica arrived 2 days later with a single, oversized suitcase and the faint, smoky scent of perpetual crisis clinging to her clothes. At 35, she still had the delicate, waif-like beauty that made people want to rescue her. Big, doe-like eyes, always slightly wide with manufactured surprise. She hugged me tightly at the door, her frame feeling bird-bone fragile. Thank you, Maya, she whispered into my shoulder. You're saving my life. I made up the guest room, her old room, with fresh linens. We ate takeout that first night, and she talked a mile a minute, a frantic, colorful narrative of evil bosses and greedy landlords. It felt almost like old times, if I squinted. The little sister, home again. I let the familiar rhythm of her drama wash over me. It was a distraction from the quiet. For the first few weeks, she was helpful. In her chaotic way, she'd make coffee in the morning, though she'd leave a trail of grounds across the counter. She'd offer to run to the post office for me, but then, remember, she needed to also stop at a job interview that always seemed to run long. She started sorting Dad's study, a task that mainly involved her sitting on the floor, weeping over old photographs, leaving piles of unsorted paperwork strewn around her. I didn't mind. Her grief was loud and performative, mine was a silent stone in my gut. Hers filled the house, masking the silence. I mistook the noise for company. The first clue was small. A chill in a conversation. We were in the living room, going through a folder of Dad's retirement fund statements. The estate lawyer, Mr. Davies, had been clear, we needed a full picture before the assets could be distributed. Dad had been comfortable, not wealthy. A retired school principal, a careful saver. The house was paid off. There were some investments, a pension, a life insurance policy. It's not as much as I thought, Jessica murmured, frowning at a statement. She was curled in Dad's armchair, a position that felt vaguely sacrilegious to me. I mean, after taxes and everything. It's what he had, I said, a bit defensively. He provided for us. He provided for Mom until the end. Our mother's long illness had drained a lot, a fact Dad never complained about. I know, she said quickly, waving a hand. It's just, you have the house. This big, fully paid house. And I've got, what? A share of some stocks and a bit of cash. It doesn't feel balanced. The air in the room shifted. It wasn't the complaint itself, it was the calculation in it. The ledger she was mentally drawing up. Jess, the house was always going to be mine. You know that. Dad and I talked about it for years. He wanted it to stay in the family, and I'm the one who's here. He set up the other assets to be split evenly. It is balanced. She looked up, her eyes instantly glassy. I'm not being ungrateful. It's just hard. You're set. I'm starting from zero. Again, she pulled her knees to her chest. It doesn't feel like he was thinking of me. I felt a spike of anger, hot and sharp, but I swallowed it. This was grief talking. This was Jess feeling lost. He loved you, Jessica. He thought of you every day. She just shrugged, a tiny, wounded motion, and went back to the papers. The subject was closed, but a door in my mind had been nudged ajar. Blank, underscore, blank. The second clue was the laptop. Jessica's ancient laptop finally gave up its ghost one rainy Thursday. It emitted a sad, metallic groan and the screen went black forever. She was distraught. All my resumes, my contacts, my life is on there. She wailed. I have my old one, I offered. It's a few years old, but it works perfectly. I just upgraded. You can use it until you can get a new one. Her gratitude was effusive. You're an angel, Maya, truly. I set it up for her on the desk in her room, transferring her files from an external backup drive she had. The process was simple, but a few days later, she hovered in the doorway of my small home office. Maya, it's being so slow. And it keeps freezing when I try to open my banking site. Do you think you could look at it? You're so much better with this stuff. A normal request. I was the tech-competent sister. Sure, bring it in. She brought the laptop, my old laptop, and set it before me. I'm just going to run to the store for some wine. We deserve a glass tonight. She gave me a quick, tense smile and left. The house settled into its late afternoon quiet. I clicked and scrolled, clearing cache, running a diagnostic. It was fine, just cluttered with her dozens of open browser tabs. As I went to close them, one caught my eye. It wasn't her banking site. It was a login page for an institution I didn't recognize, Global Secure Trust, Cayman Islands. My breath hitched, just for a second. A Cayman Islands bank. For Jessica, who could barely keep a checking account in the green. It was so absurd it was almost funny. She must have been clicking on some spam ad, some phishing scheme. Poor Jess, always nearly falling for online scams. I moved to close the tab. But my cursor hovered. Just check, a quiet, cold voice in my head whispered. Make sure she hasn't saved her password to something malicious. I clicked into the saved passwords list on the browser. I shouldn't have. It was an invasion of privacy. But the dissonance was too great, the image of my chaotic, perpetually broke sister and the sleek, ominous login page of an offshore bank. And there it was. Saved. Username, jessica.r.mitchell@gmail.com. Password, *****************. The password was visible when I hovered. It was our childhood dog's name, followed by our birth year. Milo 1992. My finger felt numb on the trackpad. This was wrong. This was a line I couldn't uncross. The house was silent. The only sound was the low hum of the computer and the frantic drum of my own heart. Outside, a car door slammed, Jessica returning. No, it was the neighbor. I looked at the login page. I looked at the password. And I logged in. The page loaded, sleek and professional. And there, on the dashboard, was a single account. Account holder, Jessica R. Mitchell. Current balance, $187,650.22. The numbers shimmered on the screen, meaningless for a heartbeat. Then they slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. $187,000. I stared. My vision tunneled, the numbers burning themselves into my retinas. This wasn't real. This was a mistake. A glitch. A fantasy of Jess's that she'd somehow mock up. I clicked on, transaction history. The list was short. 1 deposit. Date, August 12th. Description, wire transfer, initiating client, estate of Robert Mitchell. Amount, $185,000. August 12th. 3 weeks after Dad died. 2 weeks before the estate lawyer had even finished his preliminary assessment. The room tilted. The cold from the granite countertop I'd leaned against weeks ago seemed to seep up through the floor, through the chair, into my bones. I heard a sound, a thin, strangled gasp, and realized it had come from me. Estate of Robert Mitchell. The exact amount missing from the cash assets Mr. Davies had been puzzling over. It's odd, he'd said on the phone just last week, his tone politely confused. The liquid funds from your father's money market account. The statement shows a withdrawal of $185,000 in mid-August, but there's no record of a check or transfer to another domestic account. We'll need to trace it. It may be a clerical error. No error. The ship wasn't just taking on water. My sister had stolen the lifeboat and sailed away in the night, leaving me to drown. The front door opened. Maya, I got a Malbec. Are you fixed, Mai? Her voice, bright and false, trailed off as she appeared in the office doorway. She saw my face. She saw the laptop screen, glowing with her secret. All the color drained from her own. The bottle of wine slipped from her hand, hitting the plush carpet with a dull, forgiving thud. It didn't break. It just rolled, a dark red stain spreading like a birthmark on the beige wool. We stared at each other across the ruins of our family. Maya, she whispered, her voice paper thin. I can explain. The silence that followed her words was the loudest thing I have ever heard. It was filled with the phantom echo of that number, $187,650.22, and the wet, whispering seep of wine into carpet. I could smell it, tart and fruity, cutting through the sterile, dust-mote air of the office. Explain, I said. My voice didn't sound like my own. It was flat, cold, a stone dropped into a deep well. Jessica didn't move from the doorway. Her hands fluttered uselessly at her sides, then came up to clutch her own elbows. A self-soothing gesture I'd seen 1,000 times. It's not what it looks like. A hysterical laugh clawed at my throat. I swallowed it, and it turned to acid in my stomach. It looks like you stole $185,000 from Dad's estate. From our inheritance, a month after he died, and hid it in the Cayman Islands. I tapped the screen with one stiff finger. What other way is there to look at it, Jessica? He wanted me to have it. The words burst from her, too loud, too desperate. He told me, before he died, he said he was worried about me. That you were settled, with the house, and that I needed a safety net. He said he was going to leave me a little extra, privately. So you wouldn't feel slighted. She was weaving the story even as she spoke, her eyes darting from my face to the screen and back. I could see the machinery of her lie whirring behind her frightened gaze. She was taking a kernel of truth, Dad's worry for her, and building a cathedral of deceit upon it. Privately, I repeated, through an offshore bank account he never mentioned to his lawyer, his executor, or his other daughter. By draining the main cash asset of his estate, creating a legal mess and making it look like fraud or theft. I stood up slowly. My legs felt boneless. Dad was a school principal, Jess. He believed in rules, in paperwork, in doing things the right way. He would never, ever have done this. You didn't know him like I did. She shot back, a flash of her old defiance surfacing through the panic. You were always the perfect one, the responsible one. He didn't have to worry about you. He worried about me. This was his way of taking care of me, without you judging. Each word was a needle. She was trying to reframe her theft as my failing. As my coldness, my judgment, driving our father to this clandestine act. It was a masterstroke of manipulation, and a part of me, the big sister part that had spent a lifetime making excuses for her, felt the old, guilty tug. But the numbers on the screen were my anchor. They were cold, hard facts in a sea of her emotional chaos. If that were true, I said, my voice dangerously calm, then there would be a document. A codicil to the will. A letter of instruction. A note. Something. Dad was meticulous. Where is it? She blinked. I have it. Somewhere. In my things. I'll find it. Find it now. I can't just find it now. My things are a mess, you know that. Her tears started then, real tears of frustration and fear. They used to be my kryptonite. Why don't you believe me? Why do you always think the worst of me? I walked around the desk. I needed space from the glowing evidence. I needed to look at her, this stranger who shared my blood. I want to believe you, Jess. But you logged into this account on my laptop. You saved the password. You didn't tell Mr. Davies about this private gift when he asked about the missing money. You let him, and me, think there was a problem with the bank. I took a step closer. The wine stain was at my feet. You moved in with me. You offered to help me. While this money was sitting there. What was the plan? Wait until the estate was settled, until I'd gotten my half of what was left, and then just disappear with your secret nest egg. Let me think Dad had less than he did. Her face crumpled. It was the look of a child caught with a hand in the cookie jar, not a woman who had committed grand larceny from her own family. I was scared. I knew how it looked. I was going to tell you, I swear, once everything was finalized. Stop. The word cut through her sobs. Just stop lying to me. The fight went out of her then. She sagged against the doorframe, all performance gone, leaving behind a raw, terrified core. What are you going to do? The question hung in the wine-scented air. What was I going to do? Call the police. Call Mr. Davies. The evidence was right there. It would be an open and shut case of fraud, identity theft, maybe even forgery. The image flashed in my mind, Jessica in handcuffs, her tear-stained face on a local news clip. Grieving daughter steals inheritance. Our family name, Dad's good name, dragged through the mud. The anger in me was a white-hot coal. It wanted that. It wanted her punished, exposed, humiliated. It wanted justice as the world defines it. But another part, a quieter, colder part that was just waking up, wanted something else. It didn't want the messy, public spectacle of the law. It didn't want to become a true crime story for our relatives to whisper about. It wanted her to understand the weight of what she had done. Not to the state, but to me. To us. It wanted a confession, not a conviction. It wanted the truth to come from her mouth, in front of the people whose opinion she actually cared about. The seed of the plan, vague and dark, took root in that moment. I'm going to think, I said, my tone shifting from icy to something deliberately weary, defeated. I ran a hand over my face, a gesture of exhaustion. I need to process this, Jessica. This is, beyond. I saw the flicker of hope in her eyes. She mistook my retreat for weakness, for the old Maya who would bend under the weight of her drama. Maya, please. We can fix this. We're sisters, are we? The question was quiet, genuine. I turned my back on her and walked out of the office, down the hall, and into the kitchen. I needed the familiar geometry of the room, the view of the backyard where Dad had tended his roses. I heard her hesitant footsteps follow, then stop at the kitchen entrance. I filled the kettle. The mundane action was a lifeline. Click. The burner glowed blue. What happens now? She asked from the doorway, her voice small. The plan began to form, piece by piece, as I took down 2 mugs. One said, "World's best dad." The other was plain white. Now, I said, not looking at her, you are going to transfer every cent of that money, plus the interest, back into the estate's account. Today. The wire transfer, it takes a few days, and there might be fees. Today, I repeated, pouring the boiling water. The steam warmed my cold face. You will do it in front of me. Then, you will pack your things. A sharp intake of breath. You're kicking me out. I am asking you to leave, I said, placing the "World's Best Dad" mug in front of the empty stool at the island. An unconscious gesture. A ghost at the table. You cannot stay here. The trust is gone. Where will I go? The victim's whine was back. That, I said, finally meeting her eyes, is not my problem. You had 187,000 solutions to that problem, and you chose to betray your family instead. I sipped my tea. It was scalding, tasteless. Once the money is returned, I will inform Mr. Davies that the clerical error has been located and resolved. I will not press charges. The relief that flooded her face was palpable, ugly in its selfishness. She saw only the escape hatch. She didn't see the sentence. Thank you, Maya, thank you. You won't regret this, I promise. I'll make it up to you. Just get the money back, I said, turning away to look out the window at Dad's dormant rose bushes, their canes looking like bare, brown bones against the gray sky. Blank, blank. She made the transfer that evening, her hands shaking as she navigated the foreign banking site. I watched every keystroke, every security prompt. The confirmation number was seared into my memory. The money was in transit, sailing back across the digital ocean from whence it came. She packed in a frantic, haphazard way, throwing clothes into her suitcase. There was little conversation. The house was filled with the sound of zippers and drawers closing too hard. When she was done, she stood in the foyer, her suitcase at her feet, looking lost. Can I say goodbye to the house?" she asked. It was such a strange, sentimental request that it took me aback. Or maybe it was just another performance, a final bid for sympathy. I nodded silently. I watched her move through the living room, touching the back of Dad's armchair, the mantelpiece. She paused in the doorway of his study, now a half-sorted monument to her own guilt. Then she went upstairs. I heard the floorboards creak in her old room, then in the hallway. She was up there for a long time. When she came down, her eyes were red raw. "Okay," she whispered. "Goodbye, Jessica." She opened her mouth, closed it, then picked up her suitcase and walked out the front door. I didn't watch her go. I locked the door behind her, turned the deadbolt with a solid, final thunk. The silence rushed back in, but it was different now. It wasn't the silence of grief. It was the silence after a battle. A hollow, ringing quiet. I should have felt relief. Closure. Justice served, of a sort. But I didn't. The anger hadn't dissipated, it had just changed form. It was no longer a burning coal. It was a cold, heavy stone. She had gotten off too easy. A wire transfer and a sad exit. Where was the accountability? The true, gut-wrenching admission of what she had done? She would spin this to herself, to anyone who would listen, as a misunderstanding, as Dad's secret wish, as my overreaction. She would be the martyr, the misunderstood daughter, and I would be the cold, heartless sister who threw her out. The seed of the plan, planted in the office, began to grow vines. It wasn't enough. It couldn't end like this. Over the next week, as the money officially reappeared in the estate account, Mr. Davies was pleasantly baffled. These things happen, systems glitch. I played the confrontation over and over in my mind. Her lies, her tears, her instant relief at my leniency. The utter lack of true remorse. I thought about what she valued. It wasn't money, not really. She'd proven she could get that. It was her image, her status as the beloved, fragile baby of the family. The sympathy of our small, remaining circle, our Aunt Carol, our cousins, a few close family friends. That was her currency. To take that from her, that would be justice. The idea, when it crystallized, was so simple it felt inevitable. She thought she had escaped. She thought the story was over. But I was just beginning to write the final chapter. I picked up the phone and called Aunt Carol. My voice was perfectly calibrated, tired, concerned, laced with just enough embarrassment. "Aunt Carol, it's Maya. I need some help. It's about Jessica." Aunt Carol arrived 2 days later, her station wagon filled with Tupperware containers of soup and a face etched with gentle concern. She was our mother's sister, a retired nurse with kind eyes and a firm belief that most problems could be solved with a good chat and a hot meal. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of lavender and fabric softener. "You look exhausted." I let myself sag into the hug, just for a moment, allowing the performance to begin. "It's been a lot, Aunt Carol." We sat at the kitchen island, the same spot where Jessica had faced me. I pushed the "world's best dad" mug aside, a small, deliberate gesture of moving on. "Tell me everything," Carol said, patting my hand. And so I did. I told her a version of the truth. I said Jessica had been struggling deeply since Dad's death, more than I'd realized. That she'd become paranoid, secretive. That I'd found her looking at strange financial websites, talking about protecting her assets from the estate. That she'd become convinced I was trying to cheat her out of her inheritance. The other day, I said, my voice dropping to a pained whisper, she completely broke down. She accused me of terrible things. Said Dad had told her I was untrustworthy. She was screaming, Aunt Carol. It was frightening. I let a single, perfect tear trace its way down my cheek. It wasn't hard to summon. The grief and betrayal were real, I was just redirecting their source. Carol's face filled with empathetic horror. Oh, that poor girl. Grief does such terrible things to the mind. And you, bearing the brunt of it, where is she now? I had to ask her to leave, I said, looking down at my hands. For both our sakes. She's staying at the extended stay over on Route 9, I think. But I'm so worried about her. She's all alone, and her thinking is so distorted. This was the crucial beat. I wasn't the angry sister who'd thrown Jessica out. I was the heartbroken caregiver, forced to make a tough decision for the well-being of my unwell sister. She needs help, Carol said firmly, the nurse in her taking over. Professional help. She can't just be alone in some motel, spiraling. I've tried, I said, pouring genuine-sounding frustration into my voice. I've called, I've texted. She won't answer me. She thinks I'm the enemy. But if it came from you, from the family, maybe she'd listen. Carol's eyes lit with purpose. We'll do an intervention. A proper one. For her own good. We'll get the family together, show her we love her, and get her to agree to see someone. It was almost too easy. I let my face show reluctant hope. Do you think that would work? She might feel ganged up on. It's not ganging up, Maya. It's love with clear eyes. We'll do it here, in a familiar place. Neutral territory, but not a cold office. We'll have your cousins, maybe Father James from your mom's old parish. A small, caring circle. She squeezed my hand. You're doing the right thing by wanting to get her help. This is what family does. The irony was so thick I could taste it, metallic and bitter at the back of my tongue. Thank you, Aunt Carol. I just want my sister back. Blank, _, blank. The next week was a study in quiet duplicity. While Carol mobilized the family, calling our cousins, Sarah and Michael, and reaching out to the kindly, elderly Father James, I began the second phase of my plan. I needed Jessica to believe this intervention was for me. I created a new email address, something anonymous and bland. From it, I sent a single email to Jessica's main account, the one she checked obsessively. The subject line was, "Concerned friend." The body of the email was short, crafted from phrases I'd gleaned from intervention websites. Jessica, I'm a friend of your sister's. I'm writing to you out of deep concern. Since your father's passing, Maya's behavior has become increasingly erratic and isolating. Those of us who care about her are planning to gather to express our love and concern, and to encourage her to accept help. We believe she may be suffering from a complex grief reaction, possibly manifesting as paranoia and financial confusion. Your presence, as her sister, would be invaluable. The gathering will be at her home on Saturday the 18th at 2 p.m. Please, for her sake, say nothing to her. She cannot feel preempted. Come, and speak from the heart. With hope. A concerned friend. It was a masterpiece of inversion. It reframed all her actions, the secrecy, the financial manipulation, the paranoia, onto me. It offered her the one role she couldn't resist, the compassionate, needed savior. The righteous sister coming to rescue poor, unstable Maya from herself. It also gave her the perfect cover. If she walked into a room full of family all looking at her, she'd be defensive, closed off. But if she walked in believing the spotlight was on me, she'd be poised to perform, to be the star of the show, dripping with pity and concern. I hit send. Then I waited. 2 days later, Aunt Carol called, excitement in her voice. I heard from Jessica. She called me out of the blue. She said she's been doing a lot of thinking, and she's worried sick about you, Maya. She said she wants to help, that she'll be there on Saturday. Isn't that a breakthrough? My heart hammered against my ribs. The bait had been taken. That's amazing, Aunt Carol. The nausea I felt wasn't entirely feigned. She made me promise not to tell you she's coming. She wants it to be a surprise, so you don't have time to build up your defenses. Oh, I just have a good feeling about this. So do I said softly, and it wasn't a lie. I had a very specific feeling. Blank, underscore, blank. The morning of the 18th dawned clear and cold. A brittle, beautiful winter day. I cleaned the house, not frantically, but with a ritualistic focus. I vacuumed the wine stain in the office until it was just a faint, shadowy ghost. I baked cookies, filling the house with a comforting, vanilla sugar smell that felt like a lie in itself. I dressed carefully in soft, neutral colors, a beige sweater, gray trousers. I looked vulnerable, approachable, not threatening. At 1:45 p.m., the doorbell rang. It was Aunt Carol, followed by our cousin Sarah, a practical woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense haircut, and her brother Michael, a gentle giant who looked uncomfortable in his stiff button-down shirt. Father James arrived last, bringing a sense of solemn calm with him. "We're all here out of love, Maya," Carol said, taking my hands as everyone settled in the living room. The cookies sat untouched on the coffee table. "Remember that." "I know," I said, offering a fragile smile. "I'm just nervous. What if she refuses to listen?" "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Sarah said, her voice reassuringly firm. At exactly 2 p.m., the front door opened. Jessica didn't ring the bell. She let herself in with the key she had never returned. She paused in the foyer, taking in the scene. Her eyes were wide, but with a calculated, rehearsed sadness. She was dressed in simple, humble clothes, a plain gray dress, no makeup. She looked the part of the weary, concerned sibling. She carried a single tissue, clutched in her hand like a prop. "Jessica," Aunt Carol said, standing up, her voice warm with welcome. "Thank you for coming." Jessica's gaze swept over the room, lingering on each face, saving me for last. When her eyes met mine, they filled with such a convincing well of pity that for a split second, I doubted my own reality. "I came as soon as I could," she said, her voice tremulous with emotion. She took a few steps into the room, but stopped, maintaining a distance. A safe distance from the unwell me. "We're all here because we care deeply about Maya," Carol began, using the gentle, leading tone she'd practiced. "We've each noticed some concerning changes since Robert passed." Jessica nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "I have too," she whispered. "It's been so hard to watch." This was her moment. She thought the stage was set for her soliloquy. She took a steadying breath, ready to launch into her performance of concern. I let her have the floor. I sat perfectly still on the edge of the armchair, my hands folded in my lap, the picture of bewildered vulnerability. "Maya," Jessica began, taking one more step forward, her voice swelling with dramatic sincerity. "We're here because we love you. What you've been going through, the grief, the confusion, it's not your fault. But you have to let us help you. The paranoia, the accusations," she shook her head, a single tear tracing the path mine had taken a week earlier. "The things you said to me, about money, about Dad, that wasn't you. That was the grief talking." Aunt Carol and Sarah were nodding along, their faces soft with encouragement. Michael looked at his shoes. Father James steepled his fingers, watching intently. Jessica saw their support and grew bolder. "You've built this narrative in your head where I'm against you, where Dad didn't trust you, but it's not true. None of it is true. You're pushing everyone away. You're lost in this financial obsession. You have to see it." She opened her arms, a gesture of pleading openness. "Let us in. Let us get you the help you need." The room was silent, charged with her false compassion. She had delivered her lines flawlessly. She looked at Aunt Carol, expecting the baton to be passed, for the family to now turn their loving pressure on me. Instead, I unclasped my hands. I reached slowly for the small, sleek remote that was sitting beside the cookie plate. I had placed it there earlier, casually, like it was for the stereo. I looked not at Jessica, but at Aunt Carol, Sarah, Michael, Father James. "Thank you, Jessica," I said, my voice clear, calm, and utterly sane. "That was very moving. It's so interesting to hear your perspective on what happened." I saw the first flicker of confusion in her eyes. This wasn't the script. I pressed a button on the remote. The large flat-screen TV mounted on the living room wall, which had been dark, flickered to life. On it was a freeze frame, the login page for Global Secure Trust, Cayman Islands. The username field clearly read jessica.r.mitchell@gmail.com. A soft, collective intake of breath from the family. Jessica's face went as white as the walls. What is this? Her voice was a dry leaf rustling. This, I said, still in that terrifyingly calm voice, is the first clue. The one I found while trying to fix my laptop for you. Do you remember, Jess? The day you spilled the wine. I pressed another button. The screen changed to a close-up of the account balance, $187,650.22. Then it changed again, to the transaction history. The single line item, wire transfer, initiating client, estate of Robert Mitchell. $185,000. August 12th. I let the images hang in the air. I could feel the energy in the room curdle, shifting from gentle concern to stunned, dawning horror. Aunt Carol's hand flew to her mouth. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Michael looked up, his face a mask of shock. No, Jessica whispered, taking a step back, her eyes darting wildly from the screen to the faces of our family. That's fake. Maya, what have you done? This is sick. The second clue, I continued, as if she hadn't spoken, was your explanation. You said Dad gave it to you privately. That he was worried about you. I looked at Father James. Father, you knew my father for 30 years. Did he seem like a man who would secretly drain his life's savings, create legal chaos for his estate, and lie to one daughter to give to the other? Father James's kind face was grave. Robert Mitchell was the most straightforward, honest man I ever knew. He believed in doing things properly. In the light, I nodded. The third clue was your relief. I finally turned my full gaze to Jessica. It held no anger now. Just a deep, weary truth. When I told you to return the money and leave, you were relieved. You weren't heartbroken over betraying me or Dad. You were happy you'd gotten away with it. A thief's relief. Lies. All lies. Jessica's voice rose to a shriek. The tissue was shredded in her fist. She's manipulated this. She's trying to turn you all against me because she's jealous. She's always been jealous. And the final clue, I said, raising my voice just enough to cut through hers, is the one you just provided. This performance. Right here, right now. You came here today believing this was an intervention for me. You thought you could stand there and spin your lies, paint me as unstable, and use the family's sympathy to cover your crime once and for all. I picked up my phone from the table. With a few taps, I played the audio. It was the recording of the concerned friend email being read aloud by a bland text-to-speech voice. Maya's behavior has become increasingly erratic. Financial confusion, your presence, as her sister, would be invaluable. Jessica stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. The last of the color drained from her face. She had walked into a truth she could not talk her way out of. The set had been built for her, but the play was not the one she'd rehearsed. She was not the savior. She was the subject. The room was utterly silent, save for the ragged sound of her breathing. All eyes were on her. Not with love or concern, but with a devastating, unified clarity. Aunt Carol was the first to speak, her voice thick with a pain deeper than anger. Jessica, she said, is that money, Dad's money? Jessica opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked from Carol's devastated face to Sarah's hardened one, to Michael's disappointment, to Father James's sorrow. The audience had turned. The verdict was in their eyes. Her shoulders slumped. The performance evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, exposed woman. She didn't nod. She didn't speak. But the truth, in that silence, was louder than any confession. The silence after Aunt Carol's question was absolute. It was a living thing, heavy and cold, settling over the room like a shroud. The vanilla-scented air now smelled of betrayal, sharp and metallic. Jessica stood in the center of our living room, the space that had been our childhood playroom, our teenage sanctuary, the place where we'd grieved our parents. She was utterly alone. The tissue she'd held lay in ragged pieces at her feet. Her performance had been stripped away, layer by layer, until only the raw, ugly truth remained. And truth, under that many staring eyes, has a weight that can crush a person. She didn't try to speak. Her eyes, wide and frantic just moments before, went dull. Empty. The fight left her body in a visible slump. She just stared at the floor, at the pattern of the rug our mother had chosen. It was Aunt Carol who broke first. Not with anger, but with a sound of profound grief, a low, pained moan that seemed to come from a place deeper than her bones. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. "Oh, Jessica, my girl, what have you done?" Sarah, our pragmatic cousin, was the first to find words of substance. Her face had hardened into a mask of grim comprehension. She looked from the frozen image on the TV screen, that damning, digital proof, to Jessica's crumpled form. "So it's true," she stated, her voice flat. "You stole from the estate. From your own sister. From your father's memory." Michael, always gentle, looked physically ill. "Jess, why? You could have just talked to us. We would have helped you." Father James stood up slowly, the movement drawing every eye. He walked over to Jessica, not with judgment, but with the weary compassion of a man who has seen every human failing. He didn't touch her. He simply stood before her, forcing her to look up into his calm, sorrowful face. "Jessica," he said, his voice a soft rumble. "The sin is not in the need. We all have needs. The sin is in the deceit. In the theft from your family, and in the attempt to disguise that theft by harming your sister's spirit. You sought to make her appear broken, to hide your own brokenness." His words weren't an accusation, they were a diagnosis. And they shattered the last of Jessica's defenses. A harsh, dry sob escaped her lips. It wasn't the pretty cry from before. It was an ugly, guttural sound of utter defeat. The word was a croak. She cleared her throat, tried again, her eyes darting to me for the first time since the screen had lit up. There was no pity in my gaze now. Only a quiet, unbreakable finality. She looked away, back to the floor. I was scared. I had nothing. Maya had the house, she had everything. I was going to pay it back. I just needed a start. A start. Sarah's voice cut through, sharp with disbelief. $185,000 start. By stealing from your dead father. By trying to make Maya look insane. That's not a start, Jessica. That's a felony wrapped in a family tragedy. The money is back, I said, speaking for the first time since I'd started the presentation. My voice was steady. It surprised me. I made her transfer it the day I found it. The estate is whole. Aunt Carol looked up, a flicker of confused hope in her red-rimmed eyes. It is, Mr. Davies thinks it was a banking error. So, it's over? Michael asked, the eternal peacemaker. No, Sarah and I said in unison. I deferred to her with a slight nod. It's not over, Michael, Sarah continued. The money is a thing. It can be moved back. The act is the thing that can't be taken back. The planning, the offshore account, the lies she told Maya, the lies she was prepared to tell all of us here today. She shook her head. This is who she is. This is what she chose. Jessica flinched as if struck. What do you want to do, Maya? Father James asked, turning his compassionate but unwavering gaze to me. You were the wrong party. You were the executor of the estate. The law is on your side, if you wish to use it. All eyes turned to me. This was the moment, the point of the entire, painful exercise. It wasn't about police or handcuffs. I had her exactly where I wanted her, exposed, condemned, and utterly powerless in the court of her own family. I stood up. I walked to the TV and turned it off. The room felt darker without its accusatory glow. I don't want the law, I said, looking at Jessica. She couldn't meet my eyes. The law would give her a record. It would give her a story where she's a victim of the system. It would drag Dad's name through public records. I don't want that. I took a step toward her. She shrunk back, but there was nowhere to go. I wanted you to stand here, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper the family had to lean in to hear. I wanted you to stand in front of the people whose love you've always taken for granted, whose sympathy you've always weaponized, and I wanted you to be seen. Not as my chaotic little sister, but as the woman who planned this. Who logged into that bank from my home, who watched me grieve, who offered to help me, all while sitting on a secret that would have broken our family forever. I paused, letting the words sink into the quiet room. The revenge, I said, isn't in you leaving. It's in you staying right here, in this moment, and knowing that they see you. Aunt Carol sees you. Sarah and Michael see you. Father James sees you. They see past the tears, past the, poor Jessica, story. They see the calculation. And that sight, that knowledge in their eyes, you can never undo that. Jessica was crying now in earnest, silent tears streaming down her face. They were real tears, finally. Tears of shame. They held no power here. So here is what happens now, I said, addressing the room but speaking to her fate. You will leave this house, and you will not contact me. Not for money, not for a place to stay, not for sympathy. You are not welcome here. You will deal with your life, the life you have made for yourself, on your own. I turn to my family. And for all of us here, this stays in this room. We will not gossip. We will not drag this through the wider family. But we will also not enable. We will not bail her out. We will not listen to one-sided stories. We see the truth now. And we act accordingly. Aunt Carol nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. It was a gesture of painful acceptance. Sarah gave a firm, approving nod. Michael looked sad, but he did not disagree. Father James murmured, a just and merciful path. I had given them a script, a way to navigate the unthinkable. A unified front. It was the opposite of the division Jessica had sought to create. Jessica finally found her voice, a broken whisper. You've turned them all against me. I almost laughed. The sheer, staggering lack of awareness. No, Jessica, you did that, all by yourself. I just turned on the lights. There was nothing left to say. The intervention was over. Its purpose had been served, just not the one she had intended. Sarah stood. I'll drive you back to your motel, Jessica. It wasn't an offer of comfort. It was a statement of fact, a way to ensure the departure was clean, witnessed, final. Jessica didn't argue. She moved like a sleepwalker, allowing Sarah to guide her by the elbow toward the foyer. She didn't look back at any of us. At the threshold, she paused, her hand on the doorframe. For a second, I thought she might say something, an apology, a curse, something. But her shoulders just slumped further, and she walked out. The door closed with a soft, definitive click. The sound seemed to release the tension in the room. Michael let out a long, heavy breath. Aunt Carol began to cry again, softly this time. Father James went to her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. I stood in the center of the room, feeling strangely weightless. The cold stone of anger was gone. In its place was a vast, quiet emptiness. Sarah returned 10 minutes later. She's gone, she said simply. She came over to me and, without a word, pulled me into a tight, strong hug. It wasn't the pitying hug of before. It was the hug of an ally. You were brave, she whispered. And you were right. That night, after everyone had left with promises of support and silence, the house was mine again. The silence returned, but it had changed once more. It was no longer the silence of absence or the silence after battle. It was the silence of a cleansed wound. It was raw, and it ached, but it was clean. I poured the untouched cookies into the trash. I washed the world's best dad mug and put it back in the cupboard. I sat in the living room, in the dark, and I let the events of the day wash over me. Had I been cruel? Perhaps. Manipulative? Absolutely. But I had fought fire with something colder and sharper than fire. I had used her own weapons, deceit, drama, performance, and turned them back on her, not to steal, but to reveal. I had wanted her to feel the isolation she had tried to inflict on me. And as I sat there, I knew, with a certainty that chilled and calmed me, that she was feeling it. She was in a cheap motel room, utterly alone, with the knowledge that the people whose love she depended on now saw her for what she was. That was a prison no judge could sentence her to. She had built it herself, and I had simply locked the door. The revenge was complete. But as the adrenaline faded, I was left not with triumph, but with a profound and echoing sorrow. I hadn't just punished my sister. I had, in the eyes of my family, buried her. The weeks that followed were a study in quiet reconstruction. The drama was over, but its echo shaped every day. My life became a series of small, deliberate actions, a way of rebuilding the world Jessica's betrayal had cracked open. The first thing I did was call Mr. Davies. My voice was firm, clear, leaving no room for his friendly bafflement. The missing funds have been located and returned, I told him. It was a private family misunderstanding that has been fully resolved. There is no fraud, no crime. Please proceed with closing the estate as normal. He asked a few polite, probing questions, but I held the line. A misunderstanding, resolved. The phrase became my mantra. It was true, in its own way. He finally accepted it, the relief in his voice palpable. One less problem for his tidy legal world. The estate was settled. The house was officially mine. The remaining assets were split, my half deposited into my account. I transferred a portion of it immediately into a new savings account I labeled Future. It felt less like money and more like sediment settling at the bottom of a once-churned river. I heard nothing from Jessica. It was the deepest silence of all. No pleading texts, no drunken late-night calls, no manipulative messages through Aunt Carol. It was as if she had ceased to exist. I knew, through the careful, sparse updates Sarah provided, that she had gotten a job as a receptionist at a dental office. That she was renting a room in a shared house on the other side of town. That she was, in Sarah's words, existing, but not living. The family, true to their word, offered no lifelines. They were present but not porous. It was the kind of tough love they should have practiced years ago. Aunt Carol came over every Sunday for tea. Our conversations were careful at first, orbiting the giant absence in the room. We talked about Dad, about Mom, about memories that didn't include Jessica. Slowly, the carefulness faded into a new, more honest intimacy. One afternoon, as the weak winter sun slanted across the kitchen table, she put her hand over mine. I have to ask, Maya, she said, her eyes soft with a pain that would never fully leave. The way you did it, the intervention, the setup, it was so calculated. I've lain awake some nights turning it over. It was brilliant, and it was brutal. Do you feel at peace with it? I looked out at the garden, at the bare rose canes. Soon, it would be time to prune them for spring. I don't know if peace is the word, I said, choosing my words with the same care I used to prune. I feel resolved. The anger is gone. The need for her to understand is gone. She does understand, now. That's what I wanted. Not to destroy her, but to make the truth inescapable for her. So she could never again pretend, even to herself, that she was the victim of that story. Carol nodded slowly. She can't. You took that story away from her. All she has left is the truth of what she did. That's a heavy thing to carry alone. She chose the weight, I said, but there was no heat in it. It was just a fact. I just refused to help her carry it anymore. That conversation was a turning point. It felt like absolution, not from Carol, but from my own lingering guilt over my methods. I had fought dirty, but I had fought for something clean, the truth. I began to change the house. Not drastically, but significantly. I didn't want to exorcise my father's memory, I wanted to make space for my own life within it. I repainted Jessica's old room a soft, warm gray, turning it into a proper guest room office. I packed away the last of Dad's clothes, donating them to a charity that helped men re-entering the workforce. I kept his favorite sweater, folding it neatly in a cedar chest with my mother's paisley scarf. The past had its place, but it could no longer fill every room. The most significant change was the garden. When spring's first true thaw came, I put on Dad's old gardening gloves, the leather worn soft at the fingertips. I stood before his rose bushes, pruners in hand. I heard his voice in my head, his gentle instructions from a lifetime of teaching, cut above the bud eye, at an angle. Don't be afraid to cut back the old wood, Maya. It makes room for the new growth. I began to prune. The snip of the shears was loud in the quiet morning. Dead, thorny canes fell at my feet. I cut back the old wood, the growth from previous years that was now unproductive. It felt surgical, cathartic. I wasn't destroying the roses, I was giving them a chance to thrive. As I worked, the soil cold and damp under my knees, I thought about family. About the myth of unconditional love. Love should be unconditional, but trust, respect, those were currencies earned through 1,000 daily actions. Jessica had spent them all in one fraudulent transaction. You could still love the memory of the child she was, but you could not trust the woman she had chosen to become. And that was okay. That wasn't a failure of my heart, it was a boundary drawn by my sanity. I planted new things that spring. Not just roses. I put in lavender for its calming scent, and hardy perennials that would come back year after year with little fuss. I was building a legacy of resilience, not just inheritance. One afternoon in late April, I was at the local garden center, choosing a trellis for a clematis. As I rounded a corner, loaded with bags of mulch, I almost collided with someone. It was Jessica. We both froze. She was thinner, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. She wore the kind of bland, corporate casual clothes I'd never seen her in before. She was holding a single, small pot of basil. The most mundane of items. A lifetime passed in 3 seconds. The shock in her eyes mirrored my own, then quickly shuttered into a flat, guarded emptiness. There was no anger there. No pleading. Just a weary recognition and a profound desire to be anywhere else. "Maya," she said, her voice neutral. A statement, not a greeting. "Jessica." My own voice was equally calm. The world of the garden center, with its smell of peat and fertilizer, its cheerful spring music, seemed to recede. We were in our own silent bubble. She looked at my cart, at the gardening gloves hooked over the handle, at the bags of soil. "You're working on the garden," she said. It wasn't a question. "I am." She nodded, her eyes flickering with something, a memory, perhaps, of Dad on his knees among the roses. He'd like that. It was the first normal, non-manipulative thing she'd said to me in nearly a year. It wasn't an olive branch. It was just a fact, floating in the space between us. "I think so too," I replied. Another beat of silence. Awkward, but not hostile. The chasm between us was too wide for small talk to bridge. There was nothing to say. She shifted the basil plant in her hands. "Well, I should." "Yes, me too." We moved past each other, a careful, deliberate avoidance of contact. I didn't look back. I pushed my cart to the checkout, my heart beating a steady, unpanicked rhythm in my chest. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel sorrow. I felt nothing. And in that nothing, I found a strange kind of freedom. She was no longer a monster in my mind or a wounded bird I had to rescue. She was just a woman, buying basil, living a life that was no longer any concern of mine. That night, I sat on the back porch as the sun set, painting the new green leaves with gold. The clematis trellis was installed. The lavender was in the ground. I sipped a cup of tea and watched a robin pull a worm from the freshly turned earth. The healing, I realized, wasn't a destination. It was this. It was the ability to sit in silence without the noise of anger or grief. It was the capacity to tend to a garden without it being a shrine. It was the strength to see my sister and feel neither love nor hate, but a simple, unbreakable detachment. I had wanted her to feel the consequences. And she did. I had wanted my family to see the truth. And they did. I had wanted my father's legacy to be honored. And it was, not in the money she returned, but in the home I was making, the life I was tending with the same care he tended his roses. The revenge was complete. But more importantly, so was my liberation. I had cut back the old, diseased wood. And now, in the cleared space, I was finally growing. So, that's my story. I sit here now, in this quiet house, and sometimes I still trace the ghost of that wine stain in the office with my eyes. Not with anger. More like a pilgrim visiting a site where something important, something terrible and necessary, once happened. People ask me, when they hear pieces of this, the careful ones who know not to pry, but can't help their curiosity, if I regret it. If setting that trap, orchestrating that confrontation, was too cold. Too much like her. I've thought about that a great deal. In the dark hours, and in the peaceful ones. I don't regret protecting what was left of my father's life's work. I don't regret protecting my own peace. And I don't regret showing my family the truth, because a family living in a lie is not a family at all. It's just a group of strangers, pretending. But I will tell you this, revenge, even the quiet, psychological kind, is not a meal that nourishes you. It's a surgery. You use it to remove a sickness that is threatening to consume you. The operation can be a success, the tumor gone, but you are still left with the scar, and the memory of the pain, and a body that will never be quite the same as it was before. My relationship with my sister is that scar. It's not ugly. It's just, there, a reminder of a wound that is now closed. I don't hate her. I don't wish her further ill. In a strange way, I hope she finds some peace in the truth of herself, because living a lie is its own kind of prison. But her peace is no longer my business to provide, or to hinder. My business, I learned, is to tend my own garden. To water what I choose to grow. To pull the weeds when they appear, not with rage, but with a gardener's calm resolve. What I did, would I recommend it? I can't say. Every family, every betrayal, is its own unique poison. Some need the law, some need a loud, clean break. Some need years of silence. I needed them to see. And so I turned on the lights. But here is the lesson I was left with, the one I carry with me from all of this: you cannot control the actions of others. You can only control your own boundaries. For years, my boundary with Jessica was made of tissue paper, easily torn by her tears, her drama, her need. I let her chaos become my responsibility. Her failure feel like my failure. Her betrayal broke that pattern forever. I had to build a new boundary, not of tissue, but of stone and clear glass. Stone to withstand the pressure. Glass so I could always see clearly what was on the other side, with no distortion. That boundary isn't hatred, it's clarity. So, to you watching this, if you're holding a secret that's burning a hole in your heart, if you're facing a betrayal that makes the world seem off its axis, ask yourself not what they deserve, but what you need to be whole again. Sometimes justice is a courtroom. Sometimes it's a confrontation. And sometimes, it's just the quiet, irrevocable act of changing the locks, on your doors, and on your heart. Would you have done what I did? Could you have staged that intervention, held that remote, and let the truth do its terrible, liberating work? I don't know. But I do know this: in the garden of your own life, you must be the one to decide what you will cultivate, and what you must, for your own survival, prune away. Thank you for listening to my story. Truly, it means more than you know. Take care of yourselves, and tend your gardens.